Hello, friends. It's nice to see you, everyone. Just before service began, someone asked me if I had any jokes because the theme was humor. And I said, Nanda Devi and I recently got back from India, so didn't have time to go into the book of Sundara's greatest hits. But while we were in India, we were invited to go to Agra to see Taj Mahal. We weren't able to go, but those who went really marveled at its beauty. Okay. You do the best you can with what you got, I guess. So from Whispers from Eternity, demand for the opening of the spiritual eye to find God in everything. My eyes are enthralled, O Father, with the beauty of earthly flowers, with life's passing scenes, and with the sailing silent clouds. Everywhere, all I see hints at thy hidden presence. Open that eye in me which sees only thee. With that gaze, may I behold thee above, beneath, all around me, and outside me. Teach me in all things to see only thee. Open in me that eye which beholds thee everywhere, thy hidden but ever subtly reigning wonder. So that's part of our topic today. Trying to see God in everything, putting first things first in our life. As I mentioned, Nanda Devi and I were in India, and we first were in pilgrimage with Ananda Espanol, and we went to Spain and visited some holy sites of saints. But then we went to India. And if you've ever been to India or you haven't, you'll know there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of honking, especially in Delhi. It's incessant. One night, trying to sleep, I counted 15 seconds where there wasn't a horn. And that's about as far as you could get. But one night, there was a much louder sound. And the only way I can describe it is, if you've ever seen the movie Back to the Future, the very first scene, Marty McFly goes into Doc Brown's garage. There's these massive speakers. He turns up the amp, he plays a chord, and it just throws him back. Well, that's what it sounded like that night. It sounded like a truck just had these massive speakers on, and it was vibrating the windows like you wouldn't believe. And there was absolutely no way of sleeping during that. So the next morning, we asked our friends what was going on there. He said, that was the opening of Navaratri, the Hindu festival to worship Divine Mother. And the festival is it's 9 days, Nava is 9. But the overcoming of darkness with light, and it's a soul's journey. And I thought, okay, this is great. What happened that night was like, wake up. There's no way you could sleep through that. But more than that, wake up into your highest potential in God. That's what you're here for. That's where we're going to find our true happiness and fulfillment. And so it reminded me of this story that Yogananda so delightfully tells. It's just so wonderful. There's an audio recording of him telling it. And it's a story of a lioness and sheep. And there was this lioness who was very, very pregnant. And she was walking along the outskirts of the forest. And as she's walking, she sees these sheep, and she exerts herself, and she jumps. And in that exertion, this baby lion was born. And in the confusion, the baby lion starts to run away with the sheep. And so this sheep lion was growing up with the sheep. So when the sheep would bleat, that lion would bleat. And when other lions would come around to go after the sheep, it would run away from the lions. And so one day there was a lion and saw this sheep lion and said, "This is very interesting." And so he grabbed that lion, and the sheep lion said, "Oh, mister, please don't hurt me. I'm just a little sheep." And he says, "No, you're not. Wake up. You're a lion. You're a lion. Wake up." He says, "No, I'm just a little sheep." And so he scratched his head, and he says, "What do I do here?" And so he saw a pool of water, and he took that sheep lion, and he held his head to the water, and the sheep lion had its eyes closed. He said, "No, please don't hurt me." He said, "Open your eyes, open your eyes." And he opened his eyes, and he saw his reflection. He saw the lion's reflection. He said, "Look at yourself. You are a lion." And then he roared, and the lion roared, and he became a full-fledged lion. But when Yogananda told this story, it was so delightful because he says, we are all lions of God. He said to the congregation, say it with me, I'm a lion, I roar. And everybody said, okay, hold on a second. And everybody in the congregation said sheepishly, I'm a lion, I roar. And he mocked them, I'm a lion, I roar. And he said, come on, say it with me, I'm a lion. Come on. I roar. Okay. And then he said, keep on roaring with the power of God. But that type of energy is what we really need to realize that potential, because all of us have the challenges every single day, don't we? How do we get out of it? You know, we can keep replaying and recycling what's going on, this is happening to me, but we really have to put first things first and really seek that lion or lioness-like power of courage and divinity that's really within ourselves. Swami Kriyananda gives a really great illustration. And if you imagine a marionette string puppet, a string puppet is pieces of wood held together by strings. And, you know, at the top of that puppet is that top string, the top knot, with pieces of wood. And if you hold it from that top knot, the puppet falls into place and it takes shape. But if you try and hold it from this string or this string or this string, it'll just be a jumble, it'll be a mess and be all messy. And that's what happens, isn't it? When we try and pull our life up from any other string, but from the highest, things just don't really work out. But in the journey of our soul, because everyone is on the same journey, doesn't matter our religion or creed or what part, where we are in our life, we're all looking for that same inner joy, that same joy that peace that surpasseth all understanding. And so during the journey of our souls, we start to say, is this it? That's not it. Let me pull another string. Is this it? And eventually we start to get little whispers. And those whispers might be from, oh wow, if I'm kind, I feel something different in my heart. And we contrast that when we don't feel good. When I'm generous, I feel more kind. When I spend quiet time maybe in nature, I feel a presence with me. Maybe we read an inspiring quote or book, and it touches something inside of us. And then we realize that, as that Bible quote says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, we start to slowly realize that the kingdom is not an outer kingdom. It's an inner kingdom that we find in ourselves. And when we find in itself and ourself, then we start to see it reflected everywhere around us. And one might say, well, that's wonderful to seek God, but I'm very busy, and I've got a lot on my plate. I go to church, isn't that enough? I go to synagogue, temple, isn't that enough? Of course we need to do those things, but how can we start to integrate the practice of the presence of God and the teachings of yoga into everything? Because that's really what we're trying to do, isn't it? We don't want to just feel good when life is going well. We want to take that into even the smallest details of our life. And how do we seek God in that smallest details? How do we put first things first? One time I think I've told this before, I was going through a lot of financial trouble, and I was just desperate. I was trying all the normal means that you might think of in the world to get out of my financial constraints. And then I finally thought, okay, I need to somehow change my attitude toward this. And so it was during an inner renewal retreat, and this is when all the classes and meditations were over at the Expanding Light Teaching Temple. And that morning, I decided, okay, I'm going to really put energy into this affirmation on kind of wealth, material is wealth and abundance. And so I did this with as much energy as I could put into it. I mean, I was desperate. I needed help, and I didn't know where else to turn. And so I did this affirmation, and I did it for about a half an hour until I just felt like I just couldn't do it any longer. But something interesting happened. There was a shift in the consciousness. And at that point, I know something's going to happen. And I finished the meditation. I walk outside the temple, and somebody was there waiting to offer me a job. And I was surprised, but at the same time, I wasn't. Because, when we seek God first, and even those type of things, God will be there. Because God is in everything. As Yogananda said, just as the oil totally permeates the olive, so God is totally permeating every aspect of our lives. Even those areas where we don't think God is at, God is there, waiting to help us. But we have to put out that energy to say, Lord, I'm here. I'm your child. I demand thy presence. Don't beg, demand. So that's what we have to do. And so I was reflecting on this story because it was a very profound experience in my life of the power of faith. But as I went deeper into it, I was thinking how when I first went into that affirmation session, you might say, I was looking for money. I came out wanting God. I went in with the sense of I was doing the affirmation. It was I think of it as like I was affirming, I was praying, I was yearning, I was visualizing Yogananda, kind of like this elixir mix inside I was just trying to work with, to just keep my energy raised. And at one point, there was this moment where I can't explain it. You know, I never felt that I was the one who manifested it, the money, that job. I never felt like, oh, I did this affirmation, I manifested it. I just felt like I put out the energy and God did the rest. And I think that's an important point. But at one point, as I was doing this affirmation, there was just a presence came over, like I said, and the presence said, do you want money or do you want my presence as abundance? And I said, of course, that's what I want. I want the abundance of thy presence. For when we seek God first, God will take care of everything else. Isn't it true? We've all had those experiences in our life. But sometimes it's not so easy to do that. But the other thing that I realized was the importance of, you know, we have to commit to something. If we want to find a job, we can't just sit on a couch and wait for it to come to us. We have to put out the energy and commit to saying, and I will not stop until I will shake the ether until I find this which I'm looking for. And there's this reading that I heard years ago, but I think it's very appropriate. And pardon me, I forget who it was from. It says, until one is committed, there is hesitancy. The chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative or creation, there is one elementary truth, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves. 2. All sorts of things occur to help one that would otherwise never have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of incidents in meetings and material assistance, which no man would have believed would have come his way. Whatever you think you can do or believe you can do, begin it. Action has magic, grace, and power in it. The other thing I kind of came at from this experience was the feeling that God is close. You know, so often we think, and it's just part of our consciousness, as much as we might believe God is everywhere, there's still the sense that God is out there. Remember an autobiography of a yogi when Yogananda had that experience in cosmic consciousness from Sri Yukteswar. And afterwards he says, Master, when will I find God? And Sri Yukteswar says, you found him already. You don't expect God to be some, I think he said, humble personage adorning some antiseptic corner of the universe, do you? And he writes this, ever new joy is God. He is inexhaustible. As you continue your meditations during the years, he will beguile you with an infinite ingenuity. Devotees like yourself who have found the way to God never dream of exchanging him for any other happiness. And this is one of my favorite lines. He is seductive beyond the thought of competition. How quickly we weary of earthly pleasures. Desire for material things is endless. Man is never satisfied completely and pursues one goal after another. The something else he seeks is the Lord who alone can grant lasting joy. After the mind has been cleared by Kriya Yoga of sensory obstacles, meditation furnishes a twofold proof of God. Ever new joy is evidence of its existence, convincing to our very atoms. Also in meditation, one finds his instant guidance, his adequate response to every difficulty. I see, Guruji, Yogananda says to Sri Yukteswar, you have solved my problem. I smiled gratefully. I do realize now that I have found God, for whenever, and this is an important line, for whenever the joy of meditation has returned subconsciously during my active hours, I have been subtly directed to adopt the right course in everything, even details. Isn't that so beautiful? To know that, to bring up that feeling of that ever new joy of God in meditation, so that when we're not sure what to do in the details, it's in that moment that God will direct us. We were in Avila as well. That's where we started our pilgrimage. There was about over 60 devotees from America and Europe and South America. And we went to the convent of Saint Teresa of Avila, the Incarnation. And the tour guide, who was, I think, a Catholic priest in training, was telling us about imagine like you have these three, like almost rooms. And these were like rooms for the townspeople to come and meet with the cloistered nuns for like talk and maybe some spiritual advice. But there was a wall, and in that wall was this like wrought iron grill that separated the world from the convent the nuns who were in the convent. So the man was saying, oh, and this is where Saint Teresa and Saint John of the Cross would levitate together. And in this one over here, this is where, when she was meeting with one of the townspeople, Christ appeared. And so many of us were able to meditate there. But the backstory of Saint Teresa of Avila, if you're not aware of it, but she was somebody who, as a young child, had many visions and experiences of Jesus and just feelings within herself. And then when she went into convent, she suffered dramatically for like 25 years of her life. But it was also during that time, it wasn't just physical suffering, but it was also just like emotional, psychological, spiritual suffering. And, you know, even as we this reading from Yogananda, that we're trying to go for this ever new joy of God, we read these sayings, we say, that's what I want. We might even have a little experience in meditation and say, that's what I want. But still, there's the pull of the world that's saying, I want this inner kingdom, but this outer kingdom is also pretty attractive. What do I do here? And so there was in the first few years when St. Teresa joined the convent, she was pretty much, they gave her death rites like 3 times. I mean, she was just barely alive sometimes, and in comas. And then after 3 years, she just was like a miracle. She was up and ready. And so this is when people really started to flock to Teresa. And so to see this miracle. And so there was one man that she was meeting, you know, in this cell room, you might say. And, you know, she'd be up in her own little room, and then she'd start to get excited to see this man because he was attractive. But she had this kind of inner tug of war because, you know, here's these experiences she's having inwardly, but then there's this man that she was attracted to. So it was that experience that she was talking to this man, and Christ appeared behind this man, and then she just kind of went into this state, and well, that was the end of that. But all that to say, you know, sometimes the dichotomy, you know, the world, outward world or inner world, and Yogananda said it's trying to find God in everything. How do we spiritualize everything in our life and have that guiding hand behind it all? And that's why it's so important that we really develop that inner practice of meditation. It's all there is to it. There are many other techniques. But to get into that inner stillness where that joy can lead us, and to remember that joy in our activities is what we really need to do, isn't it? And we have to develop the habit. The more we do it, that put up our energy towards God, God will just be down there to be with us. Because as Yogananda said, you are never fully safe until you are in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. We ended our time in Spain when we were in Seville. And this is where Saint Fernando came, and when he was doing his kind of driving out the Moors. That's where his last city was that he kind of conquered. And we didn't know anything about him before. And boy, he was a real saint. Even when a small group of us went to the cathedral, you could just feel this holy vibration of his presence there. So if you can go at some point, I highly recommend it. It was a powerful experience. But he was a man he was a king, he was a warrior, but he was really a monk. He was really devoted to God, and especially to the Virgin Mary, Divine Mother. And so he went into battle, and before going to battle, he'd always pray. He would always have Mass with all his knights. And at one point, his wife got a little statue made for him. And it was an ivory statue about this tall. You can see it on display there. And it was this beautiful image of Mary, the Virgin Mary. And so he would always take that right before he would go into battle. And eventually he put it on I think it's called the pommel of the saddle. And so it was kind of leading the way, you might say. But it's well known that while Saint Ferdinand, had many trials and setbacks, he never lost one battle because Divine Mother was leading the way. And that's what we have to remember. When we put Divine Mother first in our life, especially in the midst of that inner battle, she will give us that courage. She will give us that strength to realize more and more that inner kingdom. We need to get out of our minds and stop thinking about it sometimes, and just act and just absorb ourselves in that inner divine presence. And we will be victorious, because that is ultimately what our destiny is. God bless you.
Lord, may we serve you all our days, ever rejoice to sing your praise, as we together your wisdom seek. Charge us with truth whene'er we speak. Lord, may we ever know your will. Come to us when our hearts are still. As we your guidance with joy receive, may we as one your bliss achieve. As we your guidance with joy receive, may we as one your bliss achieve. Blessed, blessed, the life that is given to God. Blessed, blessed,
Thank you to all of our donors for making it possible to share these videos and keep this channel ad-free. If you feel inspired to donate, visit ananda.org/give.